Matthew, I'm so excited to have you on the show. We talked a little bit before the show and got into the aspects of your life's journey and getting into what you're doing for the community and really in spirituality and trying to really get people to be the best versions of themselves. But before we get into that, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
I'm really excited to get into the conversation with you. And some of the best ways to kind of do that is to get my listeners, right, to kind of understand who Matthew is. And the best way I know how is thus far is turning back the wheel of time. And what I mean is I want to ask you, who were you as a kid? Who was Matthew on the playground? Who were you?
That's an interesting place to start. I would say I was a very quiet, introspective kid. I was the kid you probably didn't even notice. I was even out yesterday, and it's like, of all the people who don't seem all that aware anyway, I don't think a single person noticed me as I was walking around. So I think I'm a lot of a behind-the-scenes type of person, even though I am an entrepreneur and I do keynote speeches. I would say I was the quiet kid you probably didn't notice. But I'm the one who, when I did speak, they're like, wow, that kid has something to say. But most of the time, probably didn't even notice me.
That's funny. Yeah, I've had a lot of different guests, and everybody has a different range. And I always like to kind of figure out, where we talk about letting out our inner child and being that inner child and, kind of being true to our authentic person. I don't think any version of ourselves really does that better than our child version of ourselves, because there's no conditioning, there's no real kind of suppression. You are who you are at that point. So getting to see that you were introspective and you kind of trying to figure out things and assess things. So growing up through that mentality and figuring out your mindset, and I like to walk that journey with my guests and my listeners, is that I want to know how that mindset kind of evolved for you. So going through your childhood, introspective, what were the big questions, I guess, if you will, as a child that you were trying to comprehend?
Well, since you mentioned spirituality, I remember, and actually as you're talking, the type of kid I was, the kid who would go on a long bike ride by himself and just be away for hours. But I do remember walking one day with a friend and talking about, what is God? And, I was brought up really not religious, but I was Jewish, so we were in a Hebrew school. And I was like, who is this God person? Do we have one in Judaism? Like, we're just figuring out as a kid. But I really cared about that theme. What's the big picture? Is there a creator? Did somebody create me? Do I have to follow certain laws and rules? That type of stuff actually did matter a lot to me. But it wasn't really until I was 19 years old that I actually found my own personal spiritual awakening occurred, and then life started to have some meaning. Before that, it mostly was just questions.
Yeah, I think a lot of us ask those questions, and I think it's more normal than we think it is or make it out to be, right? We kind of say, oh yeah, some people are really big thinkers and ask those big questions, but there's also some people that through childhood kind of get told to, we don't know, just keep doing it, right? Just keep going through life. Just don't worry about that stuff. Just get a job, have a family, move through what you're supposed to do, and then we'll kind of go from there. So you mentioned having that 19-year-old spiritual awakening, if you will. What was that for those that maybe don't know you and wanting to hear that? And what was that revolutionary moment in your life that kind of flipped the switch, if you will?
Yes. So the first 19 years essentially were sort of meaningless to me, right? It was just a normal, traditional childhood, but I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I didn't know what I should be majoring in college. I was a liberal arts major. And so really nothing special. And then lying in bed one night, I was with my girlfriend at the time. We just finished making love, to be totally transparent about it. And she was rubbing my chest, just lying there in bed. And this was nothing out of the ordinary as far as what happened during the day or that experience with her. For no reason I could understand what went from a world of separation and individuality, the way most people understand life, it was an instant where everything became oneness. There was light everywhere. There was love everywhere. The word didn't matter, the word God, but it was, whatever we call that, God. This is that. This is an experience of that. I also had a sense of something immortal and eternal, like the idea of reincarnation, that we continue on. There's a bigger picture. It was a bigger journey. It was pure joy. It was awe, and it was perfection. It was a glimpse of something that I never experienced before, never heard about before. As you kind of mentioned, like, people don't talk about a lot of this stuff when you're growing up. But after that, I turned to my family and the people around me and said, what is this? Have you heard about this? Right? Usually when you have a question, you can go to people and then give you an answer. Nobody knew what had happened to me. And I figured, oh, this is going to last forever because this is reality. I just inadvertently tapped into something awe-inspiring and valuable, and yet it was gone the next morning. And I got pretty much depressed because I said, I need that in my life. So in college, I changed my major to philosophy and then to religion to try to figure out what had happened to me. It was that significant. And again, I went from a childhood that was fine, but nothing noteworthy. But when that happened, it was noteworthy. I said, okay, now life has something to strive for, something to work to achieve, and something to share with others. Because having that experience, I not only wanted to have it again for myself, which I absolutely moved into over and over again, and then it just becomes part of a living reality over time, but I really wanted to share it with others. It just seems so valuable. If everybody understood we're one self, there's one light, there's one love, it's inherently good, we're just part of the same whole, it would change the whole world. So I dedicated my life to that.
Wow. What a story. I gotta say, everybody has, again, these catalytic moments, these moments of awakening. It could be sometimes trauma-based. Yours was enlightening-based, which is very interesting, and what would deem more non-traditional from what I've seen and had on the show is people typically have traumas in order to see, like, oh, maybe there's something more to this, and then they go on this journey. You've had it in the reverse aspect. I had the journey early, and now I'm trying to find my way back to it, which is amazing and incredible way of seeing it. And you spoke into it of the oneness and the one aspect of all, and a lot of things there. And we live in a duality, if you will, where there's good and bad, there's up and down, there's light and darkness, but in aspects of a deeper reasoning and understanding, it all is all one. For those that are trying to comprehend that notion or what you're saying of there is only one, and people are going to maybe say, no, there's not. There's my wife, there's my partner, there's my child over there. I can see the differences. How can we, or how could you elaborate into that of getting that understanding that it is all just one?
Yeah, well, we could look at it from so many different levels. Yet, just imagine a sea of atoms, right? That everything is made of one basic energy, right? There's just a bunch of protons, neutrons, electrons vibrating around, manifesting into form. And if we trust our physical eyes and we say, okay, because I see differences, that must be what's happening. But what if you shifted your eyes to X-ray vision, or you're seeing gamma rays, right? You would perceive a very different world. So what if you could see underneath it all? What if you are behind the scenes, like behind the matrix, right? When we look from the surface, yeah, there's up, down, left, right, good, bad, him, her, child, parent. But if you get down to it, well, really, it's just a bunch of atoms. Okay, well, what's at the core of every atom? Or what's inside the atom? We know, it's basic science, it's 90+% empty space, right? So really, you're just talking about a sea of emptiness, right? Or a sea of energy. In Buddhism, the idea is shunya, or emptiness, that there is no individual separate self. It's like if my left hand is saying, man, I don't have enough. Well, then my right hand doesn't have enough. Or if my left hand has money, then my right hand is better off. If my left hand is hurting, my right hand is hurting. It doesn't really matter philosophically, right, what we all believe, because we all believe different things. There's something immensely practical about honoring that we're all one. So if I honor that you and I are one, then you being better off makes me better off, right? If I help you to succeed, then I'm more successful. If there's less people who are impoverished and less people on welfare, we're all better off. So any approach that you take, and go on and on, of course, about different ways to acknowledge oneness consciousness, aside from the philosophy, it seems to be incredibly pragmatic. to honor we're all one family, we're all one being. It doesn't say that we don't honor duality or the relative world or time and space. It just says if we honor that there's one love permeating it all, it can change our entire view of how we live our life.
Wow. Yeah. If there's one love permeating for all, right? That in itself is a powerful notion of truth there. And a lot of people might struggle with that, and getting on that journey of spirituality or of acceptance that there is a potential of oneness, and that maybe they don't feel as if they're a part of the oneness, and they cast themselves out of it because of turmoil or traumas or events that have taken place in their own life. How could we get people to understand that the events that happen to them, the suffering in which they face, does not define who they are at the deeper level? So what could we say to those people?
Yeah, well, if they're suffering, a big question would be, have you suffered enough, right? To say that there's a chance to change, there's a chance for something to be different. I usually start by encouraging people to ask the question, who am I? Right? Because we live under this assumption that we know. But for me, I think I was open-minded enough as that quiet kid who was introspective and questioning life, where I guess I really didn't know. My grandfather would always come up to me and say, tell me everything you know. Tell me everything you know in a minute. And it was like a Zen koan. It was one of those, how do you answer this question? And I would just say, I don't know. So I would pose that back to anybody who's suffering, just to really stop and say, who are you? Maybe you don't know. For instance, at a Zen monastery, and this is loosely speaking, some of the stories are they don't just let you in easily. You knock on the door and you say, can I come in? They say, well, who are you? And you say, well, you give your name. And they go, nope, you're not allowed in. Well, what's that about? Come back the next day and knock on the door. Who's there? And you say something else. You're like, nope. And why aren't they letting me in? And then finally, after like 10 times, you knock on the door. They say, who is it? You go, I don't know. They go, good, come on in. You've become stupid enough to enter the gates. You've let go of what you think you know. So if you've suffered enough, and so you said and I acknowledge there's two ways we tend to enter what you might call a spiritual path, or just a quest for truth, or knowing who am I. One is, it just, like me, slapped you in the face. You couldn't deny it because you had the experience. Most people, especially when you're suffering, haven't. But like you said, they've suffered enough, and so they start seeking, right? They're looking for books and teachings. I had had that experience, and it made me say, well, others must have had the experience. And who are those people? In my studies of philosophy and religion, I found out what we call the world's saints and sages had that experience. And I said, well, let those be my role model, right? I'm in college. I could make doctors or psychologists, or I could take those paths. But who are the ones that I want to be more like? And it was like, whoa, the ones who are filled with light and love and peace and joy and bliss and wisdom and passion, who are being of service to humanity, who are divinely inspired, who write these awe-inspiring books and whose lives are worthy of embodying for myself, like that's what I want to follow. So if you're suffering and you're skeptical about this kind of stuff, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy, right? Or just have you suffered enough? And if you're willing to have that open-mindedness to become somewhat of a seeker, to say, maybe I don't know, then by looking at role models who have found these answers, it's not just that they're theologically or philosophically right, because who cares about being right? It's like you'd rather be happy. To know that there are people who live their lives filled with ecstasy. I remember I was tapping into bliss and doing yoga and meditation and Tai Chi. I felt so light and so good. And I told my parents, I'm in college. Again, I just think everybody's going to want this. I'm like, Dad, I'm feeling bliss. He goes, I don't care about bliss. I'm like, what do you mean you don't care about bliss? So what I offer through my life's work is not that you have to believe what I believe. Beliefs don't matter at all. It's an experience. And would you rather experience darkness, misery, separation, loneliness, and fatigue, or would you rather experience love and light and peace and joy and bliss? It's, to me, a really simple decision. But if you think you know who you are and you're suffering, I would politely say you don't know who you are. I had a teacher, he would say, if you are not filled with love, something is wrong. Your natural state is love. Your natural state is bliss. Your natural state is joy. And I'm not saying I vibrate at the highest level all the time. In fact, today I ate some food last night. I'm like, what? But, so that's physically. But deep inside, that light and love is always there in everybody. So yeah, bodies can feel different ways, but the essence of us is always there to tap into. And to me, again, that's just extremely valuable. I don't need to prove anybody right or wrong. I just want to help people to return to that wholeness. And I've dedicated my life to understanding the mind-body connection and psychosomatic illness. So if you're depressed, you're anxious, you're miserable, okay, well, you might be right if you want to be right about your worldview, but you're causing psychosomatic illness by holding on to those type of emotions, right? So if we're not feeling oneness and love, okay, fine. If you're not interested in that. But if you're sick because your mind is thinking miserable thoughts, causing miserable emotions, causing psychosomatic illness, it doesn't have to be that way. I'm a Course in Miracles teacher and student, and the Course teaches there's only one problem and one solution. The problem is the feeling of separation from that sense of wholeness and love and joy. The solution is just oneness, just get people back into that state. And then the body tends to respond in a very positive way. Right? There's ample studies now to show if you're in a state of love, it is far better physiologically. Gratitude is far better for your body than fear and anger, right? So again, it's just very practical to return to love and peace. The thing is, we really need the teaching of forgiveness to understand why we want to make that shift. So if we say, okay, there is a world of misery and there's a world of joy, there's a world of sickness and there's a world of health, well, any sane person is going to want the one that's feeling good, but how do we get there? As a Course in Miracles teacher, it's always about forgiveness, and people don't always understand what that is, and therefore they don't always make the choice to do that. So yes, like, who are you? Why are you so adamant about your point of view? And maybe you don't know who you are, and maybe you're wrong, right? Maybe there's a far better way to live. So after we've suffered enough, as you mentioned, we just tend to get humble enough to say, maybe I don't know. So again, me being that quiet, introspective kid riding his bike, asking questions, I wanted to know. And I think it was that one simple desire to say, there's got to be something more. That's kind of what it was. It was 19 years of, what is this? Why am I here? I don't know where I came from. Like, what? Like, the body was born, but like, where did I come from? And where am I? So I don't know who I am. I don't know where I am. Like, well, you're on Earth. Well, where's that? Well, it's in the solar system. Well, where's that? Okay, so you don't know who you are. You don't know where you are. You're like an amnesia victim who's dropped down on this planet. You're on a planet spinning around a big fireball in the sky called the sun. You don't know anything except you're like, what if they dropped you on Mars? Like, I'm on Mars. What's going on here? So you start questioning, you start seeking, and then you realize there are solutions. It's like trying to get through a jungle, and you're on one side. You hope there's another side, which is better, but you don't want to have to carve through the jungle yourself because that's a lot of work. But what if others have already walked that path, left footprints, made a clear trail, and said, all right, this is the way to go, and we've made it to the other side. We know what healing is. We know what love is. We know what enlightenment is. All right, just follow in the footprints of those who've gone before. What do they teach? The same things: forgiveness, love, compassion, kindness. To me, it's just about making those choices and empowering people to do so as well.
Yeah, it's a big mission. It's a big mission in a world that we live and all the struggles that a lot of people seem to see and face, and not discounting any of the traumas that others are facing at all. But it's easy to get into the victim mentality, of the victimhood of conditioned reality, if you will, of just, this is just the way it is. It just sucks to suck. You know, there's no other way. This is just what we are. This is because of X, Y, Z in the past. You can't ever like start anew and then go again in a lot of people's minds. So getting them to get to a point of realization where they can be self-empowered and self-compassionate and self-loving and all the sorts of, we've heard it before in the past. We've heard it from great teachers before. We've heard it from very successful individuals. You have to love yourself before you can love anyone else, right? So healing and forgiving yourself in the past and the events that have happened to you that you could take blame for, and anything that you kind of hold against yourself is one of the beginning steps of, like you said, who are we? Who am I? And who is the I? And at that point, that nobody focuses into that part enough of who is that? Who is that person that's asking it? And how do we find time for that? So you said, who am I? Asking that question in the beginning, getting into it. What if somebody's looking to accelerate that process even more? I know you do hypnotherapy and a lot of things regarding healing of that route. Is hypnotherapy a potential catalyst or assistant or tool that can help the healing process?
It absolutely is. So yeah, my background being in philosophy and religion made me say, okay, what am I going to do with this information? The main thing I learned during my bachelor studies was blockages, that this love and light that I tapped into appears to be the one energy that's everywhere, right? Wherever I go, I can tap into that because it seems to be the one universal energy, whatever we want to call that. I didn't know how to clear the blocks. What A Course in Miracles says is, this is a course on love. We can't teach you what love actually is. That's beyond what can be taught, but we can help you to remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance, it says. So I realized, okay, there's just blockages that we have to clear, okay? We can call them energy blockages. So I dedicated my life after my baccalaureate studies to Chinese medicine. I went to 2 different Chinese medical colleges thinking, okay, people are blocked because of these energy blocks. I can use acupuncture needles and massage and herbs. After years of studying that, I was like, there's still something else. There's still something else. Eventually, long story short, I realized it's the mind. The mind is the problem. It's not your body that's making you feel miserable, like you talked about victim consciousness. Well, the world makes me miserable. No, nothing outside of your skin actually makes you miserable. We eventually realized, no, my happiness is my own choice. My choice to be at peace or to have compassion, right? Okay, yeah, life is challenging. I'm not denying there's a lot of challenging things out there, right? But how we respond to that is very much a choice. So I started seeing all paths eventually lead back to the mind, right? Why do you have these negative behaviors? It's your mind. Why do you have mental, emotional blockages? It's your mind. And then, from a spiritual point of view, there's nothing wrong with your soul, right? There's nothing wrong with the essence of you, your higher self, your spirit, whatever you call that is fine. So if the body isn't causing its own problems, like in psychosomatic illness, by definition, psychosomatic means the mind caused the somatic, the physical problem. So, okay, I want to help heal people's bodies. All right, well, it's actually not the energy, it's the mind. So eventually I found hypnotherapy. And while I have a strong background in philosophy, religion, and Chinese medicine, very powerful voice, if you will, while I was having my first ever hypnotherapy session, myself said, "You're going to be a hypnotherapist." I said, "No, I'm going to be a Chinese medical doctor." It said, "No, you're going to be a hypnotherapist," which didn't seem as prestigious, and I didn't know what it was. But I started studying it, and I was like, oh my God, this is everything I've ever been looking for. If somebody came in with shoulder pain in the Chinese medical clinic, we would poke them with needles. If somebody comes in with shoulder pain for hypnotherapy, we would regress them to the cause. There's many ways to deal with these things, but we could regress them to the cause of the pain, heal the cause of the pain, which is quite often just memory from childhood, that's something that's unresolved that's still playing out in your life now. It's a complicated discussion, but essentially I realized, wow, I can heal. I can, first of all, help people to wake up spiritually by using hypnotherapy. I can help to heal their mind. I can help to heal their emotions. I can help to heal their energy body. I can heal their physical body. I can change their behaviors. I can increase prosperity consciousness. So my life mission in my early 20s became clear that it was about health, wealth, and enlightenment. I was like, well, how do I do that? That's a nice big goal. Let me help to enlighten the whole world, heal the whole world, health, wealth, and enlightenment. The mind was the key to make that happen, or to be part of that solution. So yeah, hypnotherapy and then meditation. I get very into, because of my personal spiritual awakening, I started studying meditation as soon as I could, because I realized, I guess you just have to meditate to tap back into that. that was back in the 90s when yoga and meditation weren't the cool thing yet. And then yoga kind of became cool. Now meditation is becoming cool, which is great. So I run instituteofhypnotherapy.com. Yet another project of mine is onlinemonastery.com. So my experience is if you combine hypnotherapy, meditation, and I do breath work is a big part of that, as well as Course in Miracles work. What I do is I like the Mercedes model, which says the best or nothing. I just tend to pick the best of everything I can find. So for me, what was the best form of healing the mind? Well, hypnotherapy. We can use hypnosis, get deeply in there and make change very quickly. Right? What are the best forms of meditation? And best can be subjective. Yet I have to find what works for me, and then I just work to teach that to others. So yeah, how do we speed up the process of getting whole again? I cannot recommend enough hypnotherapy. We offer a life mastery course through our school, so that's just popped in my mind. That's a powerful way to help to get success in every category of your life. But through hypnotherapy, life mastery work, breath work, A Course in Miracles, and yes, our life mastery course, you can catapult people into success with systematic and duplicable processes, right? One person can do it, realize, whoa, this worked, and then teach it to others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of that stuff is life-changing, and like you said, they're catching fads now, which is kind of funny and ironic that, other places are trying to run as a fad and, do yoga. But the deeper reason on why you do the yoga and what the point of the yoga is kind of lost in some translation there. And then breath work and getting into the true aspects of why you breathe the way you do when you're focusing on your breath and really diving deep into that spiritual place. If somebody, I always like to give practical tips. So if somebody is just going to try, and I've done meditation, I think we've talked about meditation to a point in aspects of where we're at in the world currently and where my listeners are to have an understanding of where basics of meditation are. But I think breath work is one that I haven't really harped on in the past, and I want to get some very practical tools for maybe they're not ready to jump both feet in, right? They just want to dip a toe in, and they want to play around with some breath work, and they want to see what that really means. If you were to give somebody some practical beginner steps on how to start incorporating breath work and what breath work looks like, what would you say?
I would recommend that, because I don't know your audience or any specific person listening, not to just jump into breath work on your own. People tend to carry a lot of emotional baggage, and we all want to be further along than we are. So it's really good to have professional facilitation for breath work. If I just taught a technique, people start doing it at home, it will bring up emotions. And everybody's like, oh, I want to be free. I want to be happy. I want to be healthy. A lot of people don't understand the closer you get to the light, the more you see your shadow. And they don't necessarily understand the need for shadow work to look at. You mentioned the inner child. Our inner child is not always the happiest person in there, right? We're filled with hurt and sadness and fear and anger. So honestly, the best self-help technique I could recommend is help yourself by getting professional facilitation by somebody who really knows what they're doing. I'm not plugging my own private practice. I don't really see clients anymore. I'm saying this because sincerely, if you're going to do breath work, you have three basic options. Do it on your own, do it in a group, or do it with a high-level professional facilitator. Doing it on your own means nobody will be there to help you through your issues because you're going to detox it. You'll regurgitate up a lot of stuff from your subconscious, memories from your past, negative beliefs, negative emotions. It's very hard for somebody who doesn't have professional training in it to unravel their own blocks. And even like graduates of mine who have high-level professional training, we still always recommend work with a classmate, work with a colleague, work with one of our staff members. So one, you could try it on your own, but you're not going to be able to necessarily resolve your own stuff well. You could, number two, do it in a group. The problem is everybody's maybe crying and screaming in a breath work experience, but there's not good one-on-one professional facilitation because you got like 50 people in a room. When you do breath work with a well-trained practitioner who really knows how to resolve whatever comes up, then in that very session, you can do a certain type of breathing. It will bring up your negative beliefs, negative emotions, negative memories, and you'll see how it relates to your physiology. For instance, if you have really bad headaches, while you're doing the breathing, your headache will probably get worse temporarily during the breath work experience. Then all of a sudden the emotions come up that are causing the headache. Then the belief systems come up, and that could be like, I'm so angry, I hate this headache, I feel powerless and trapped and helpless and stuck. Who's going to help you to resolve all that? Just because it comes up, that's only a percentage, I don't know exactly what percentage, but it's less than 50% of the healing process. Okay, we brought it all to consciousness. Now what do we do with it? When you have somebody who really knows how to facilitate that and clear it, we can eliminate the memories that cause all those problems. We can eliminate the negative beliefs you hold about yourself, the negative emotions, and the headaches. And that can happen usually in a 2-hour session. No guarantee. And, again, working with a professional would mean possibly doing that in coordination with your physician, because you're talking about a medical condition here, possibly, right? You never know if that's like a brain tumor. So I don't recommend breath work being done just on one's own. But once you learn the technique, I can give something to your audience. What can they do? Take 10 circular rhythmic breaths at least once a day. Just right. Just do that a few times. Don't do that until, for 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes, because then again, it can stir up a lot of subconscious content. But to keep yourself from getting blocked, be sure to keep rhythmic, circular, diaphragmatic breathing happening often. A lot of my work as far as self-help goes are what I call the opening the heart teachings. And it's 3 essential things to understand. Number 1, stop suppressing your emotions. If you're going to do breath work, but you keep bottling up your feelings, that's breath work is meant to reverse the suppression mechanism. So stop bottling up your emotions, number 1. But then number 2 is don't act out on your emotions. Don't vent them just because you hear somebody say, oh, you shouldn't suppress. That doesn't mean you need to be expressing either. It's like, what do you do with your anger? Don't push it down in your heart anymore, right? Breathe and feel the emotion. Then number 2, don't act out on it, because then you're just reinforcing the pattern, and the toxins in you are now coming out in your life and hurting others. So the third thing, the thing to do, so number 1, don't suppress. Number 2, don't act out on your stuff. Number 3, relax your body when you're feeling an emotion. Keep breathing, just normal breathing, and feel your feelings. It's revolutionary, right? Just relax, breathe, and feel. Like, feelings are meant to be felt. And, it's amazing we have to teach this to people, but they don't teach this to you in high school. In grade school, when did somebody say, okay, when you have an emotion, this is what you do? Usually it's, you should be seen and not heard, right? Just suppress that. Don't cry, suck it up. But that ends up putting blocks in the heart. So instead of talking about the breathwork technique, the best self-help technique is to learn what to do every day with your emotions. If your audience is interested in YouTube for free, you can just Google my name. Just type in the search in YouTube, Matthew Brownstein, Opening the Heart. And I give 1-2-hour talks of hundreds of hours of recordings about just what to do with your emotions. That to me is more important to empower people with than any one technique, but what to do moment by moment when you're dealing with life, right? There are a lot of challenges out there. It pushes our buttons, and knowing what to do with that in relationship to breathing is actually very effective, very powerful.
Yeah, you talk about emotions and the aspects of recognizing them and just acknowledging them for who they are or what they are versus, like you said, suppressing them or expressing them, as you would say, is powerful stuff. And it's inspiring and really empowering to kind of just, you are angry, you could be sad, you could be whatever, but just watch it, just be with it, let it ride its wave. And, just like, I think there's a quote out there, I don't remember who said it exactly, but just like weather in the sky passes through, right? You're the sky, the clouds are your emotions and events around you. So it just, again, it will come and go, they'll come, they'll pass, but you're bigger than that. So don't suppress them, right? And don't express them where that's all you are every time. And like you said, you almost become like a tightened up spring at that point where anger, you suppress, gets a very tight spring that it just takes one little event for you to explode. So expressing that, or really just allowing them, is one of those powerful things that you were saying. When we're talking about the mind, and I want to kind of tie back to it while we're getting into healing and self-help and getting people to understand a bigger version of themselves, and could be on the path of entrepreneurship, could be on the path of trying to get a new job, could be in the path of taking a risk of getting into a new relationship, to expanding in their spiritual pathway. When we're saying that the mind is not the root of evil, I don't really like that, but the root of a kind of a conditioning, a pathway of thinking, a way of just programmed thought processes, where this is just the way it is, victimhood, you programmed your mind to think that way. What have you been able to see help the most for people? We said hypnotherapy, we said meditation, we said breath work, we said emotional stuff, but books, seminars, I know you have so much content out there to provide people, but is there anything that somebody could read or consume that begins to awaken themselves to those limited thoughts or those negative emotions that sometimes people aren't ready to go right into professional help, and they're going to say, no, I don't have a problem, but then they'll go behind closed doors and read books and watch seminars and all the sorts. So is there anything that is that first step to kind of get them awakened to they do have limited thoughts, and that kind of makes sense now?
Yeah, well, it would be something for each individual. Like if I was sitting with one client, I might give a different recommendation for a book. So as you're talking, I'm like, okay, what am I going to say here? There's hundreds of books that could be recommended for a beginner. However, if you said, what's the one book that you could recommend that could really help? A Course in Miracles. Again, I'm a religion philosophy major. I studied everything, and not necessarily with blind faith. I mean, when you're a religion major in college, you're very critical of scriptures, and you look through and see where are the contradictions and how many authors were there and why did they leave certain books out. So it's very hard to take any one scripture and just say this is absolute truth across the board. Although some people do with the Bible, and that's great. That serves them, of course. That didn't quite work for me. I needed something I could trust, something that wasn't based in history, but that was practical, that never contradicted itself, that had no grammatical errors. It wasn't other people's point of view, right? When a human writes something, it tends to be mediocre, at best, because, we're humans and we're doing the best we can to figure things out. When I found A Course in Miracles, on the surface, it was a Christian theology, and it was all masculine pronouns. And I was like, okay, well, let me get through that. It says, instead of just saying he, I'll think in my mind, okay, he, she, right? It means like everybody. It teaches that while it's a Christian theology on the surface, it's really based just on a universal theology. And it's simply about moving from fear to love, from illusion to truth, from ego to spirit. And it's all about forgiveness as the means to make that shift. Once you get to the underlying teachings of it, I realized this is one of the most profound texts that have ever come about on the planet. So the course can be hard to dive into. For a beginner to pick up page 1 would be like picking up the Bible at page 1. You would need some kind of primer or a teacher. So a good book to get into the course is a nice primer is Marianne Williamson's Return to Love. She did a beautiful job of explaining just what is the course in a really simple, user-friendly way, right? And, again, like we started talking about this sense of oneness and love, and people might say, oh, well, there's no such thing. And that's fine. A Course in Miracles says a universal theology is impossible, but a universal experience is not only possible, but it's necessary, right? So it's possible to experience love, peace, joy, bliss, oneness. And people might say, well, what's practical about that? The Course says this is the most practical thing you can do. Like you bring up entrepreneurship, right? I'm an entrepreneur. I run a company with multiple income streams and, as a business leader, what I find about being in touch with that essence of love is there's guidance there. There's a clear path to walk. I never have to figure out what to do. My inner guidance tells me what to do. So, of course, the miracles using Christian terms would call that the Holy Spirit. Whatever we call it, to know that there's a higher, wiser mind in me that can guide my actions in a way that leads to success is such a sublime way to live. So, A Course in Miracles, I would recommend to anybody who's open to it. And again, if it seems a bit daunting to get into the Course, Marianne Williamson's Return to Love is such a beautiful way to present it.
Yeah, those are good books. I'm gonna add them on my to do or to read list, if you will. So those, I appreciate that, and I know listeners do as well. I want to kind of figure out where things are going for you now, and I always like to see, kind of walk the trajectory through my shows of, where people started from, what they're doing now, the meat and potatoes, and then where are you headed, right? So where are the big missions? Like we talked about, you're doing the online monastery, you have the hypnotherapy school. What is Matthew's life goal in maybe 5-10 years?
All right. Yeah, it's huge, actually. So I couldn't even talk about all of it. Yet when I meditate, I get very clear, very quiet, and the vision is just there. So again, I don't have to figure it out. So we run the Institute of Interpersonal Hypnotherapy. We're adding more and more hours. We're increasing. My main mission is to raise the standards of hypnotherapy education. Because like I said, when I got into it, the standards were relatively low. And I'm still surprised how low the standards are. So we're continuing to grow that through not only the diploma programs, but into degree programs, and helping that to become a much more respected profession. We founded the Interpersonal NLP Society, so Neuro-Linguistic Programming. We continue with basic and master training to enhance the quality of NLP training. I founded onlinemonastery.com, yet I own 20 acres of land up in the Adirondack Park in upstate New York. So the plan is actually to build a physical structure and kind of a small monastic center with residents, so there can be retreats, workshops, but people who live the teachings, who are practicing meditation seriously because they're interested in personal enlightenment, and beyond just personal. It's like global enlightenment, but starting with oneself. So the monastic path is a big part of it. The educational path is part of it. I've published 5 books now. I'm working with the book publisher to actually redo the majority of those. I don't ever seem like I'm satisfied with what I've done, at least so far. So I'm always working to improve every aspect of what we do. We're relaunching a networking group that I used to do. We offer conferences. The next one will be in Florida, but we're working to move those to Washington, D.C. to make that even more prestigious, and hopefully to get some of our energy into D.C., which clearly needs a little bit of guidance and love and truth and peace and kindness and compassion. So, between conferences, continuing education courses, raising the standards of training, rewriting books, creating retreats. Yeah, I could go on. The vision is really quite big. And then I'm doing podcasts like this. I run my own Illuminated Mind podcast. So every Monday night I teach conscious community classes online, and then a lot more networking. So I have a team of 30 or 40 people now, something like that I work with to just get the mission out there. And that's a glimpse of the answer to your question.
Fascinating. Yeah, fascinating. I love it. That's a huge mission, and it's definitely something that can strive for, and a lot of people can find hopefully inspiration of it and find things about you and get tied back into things that you're offering that can hopefully help them along their own journey, because I believe we all have something to offer in this world, and I think that's very special. I want to say and we're getting to the end of the show, and I always like to wrap it up with a couple questions. One of the questions is related to the book, so you filled that one already, so we got the book question. My last question is, if you had one thing to say to a young person or to a young adult, and it could be just a whole sentence, could be a theory, could be an idea, what would you say?
Stay on the path. The reason for those 4 words, when I was my first philosophy class, my first philosophy professor really changed my life. He taught me how to think. He opened my mind to questioning, what is knowledge? Who am I? And after he's finished that class. I saw him on campus, and I was like, I just want to say, you've changed my life so much. I thank you so much. And he said, stay on the path. So first of all, to realize there is a path, and to stay on it. The idea that there's more to life than just food, shelter, clothing, get your computer, get on the internet, create all the things people are so into. But to realize there's a deeper path. In the book Conversations with God, they asked Neil Donald Walsh, who authored that book, what have you learned after all this? He said, I've learned there is a path, and while I'm not done with it, at least I know I'm on it. So to know there is, and what does path mean? We can call it the spiritual path if that helps, but to realize it's not just some random, chaotic, blind evolution where there's no meaning whatsoever. Most people live in a meaningless universe. To know there's a path means there's meaning. Like, I'm on my path. You mentioned about everybody has a mission and a purpose. Staying in your path is you have a mission, you have a purpose. Like, I love the way you're doing this interview, the questions you ask, right? This is part of your mission, your dharma, if you use that term, your life's purpose. So dharma is like, what is your purpose? What is your mission? If you don't know it, get on the path to find it. Once you know what it is, stay on the path. And I've learned, don't waver from the path. Every time you fall off of it, you suffer, right? Every time I get too complex or think there's something else to do, like I told you essentially what my mission is. If I get into real estate, I've tried, doesn't work. I get into commodity trading, doesn't work. I get into multi-level marketing, doesn't work. I gave it up in my 20s, but I've learned there's a path to stick to your path, and that path tends to be of service to others. And a secret to getting rich is find a need and fill it. And if you have a mission that's meant to serve other people, that's how you're going to fulfill the need for others. So again, my mission is health, wealth, and enlightenment. And if you just stay on your path, it tends to lead towards that.
Yeah, couldn't say it better. I say, yeah, without a doubt, stay on the path. Keep going down it. So many times we get distracted by shiny objects and try to go some other direction, rabbit trail ourselves into a snare for a minute, and then we find ourselves out of it again. So without a doubt, I think this show's been great, and I really appreciate you coming on and bringing what you've brought into aspects of understanding and practical ways and tools. And as always, anybody looking to get more information about Matthew, hit down into the show notes and you can find more information about Matthew and what he's offering in every aspect of his business. So Matthew, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an honor.
Thank you, Brian. It's a pleasure. I'm glad to see you doing what you're doing. You're doing great. So thank you.